Okay, so welcome back. This is the afternoon session of the symposium for Whalefest. I'd like to again thank the Old Monterey, the Old Fisherman Wharf Association, Monterey. The merchants have supported this event year after year. This is an effort to feature the rich heritage of this area, including the heritage brought to us by whales. But this afternoon, we are going to talk about the bounty of the bay, the heritage of fishing in Monterey Bay and around the Monterey Peninsula. So we're going to have four presenters this afternoon. The first will be Tony Goulart with Portuguese Heritage Publications. And Tony, would you please come forward?
Just a little introduction so we get situated. Who I am, I immigrated in 1974. I was born and raised in the island of the Azores, the Pico Island of the Azores, one of the 9 islands that form the archipelago off the coast of Portugal, midway the Atlantic, in the Atlantic between the east coast of the United States and Europe. And I started off when, after arriving in the United States in '74, at about 20 years of age, I started by picking apricots in East San Jose, doing janitorial work, gardening, and then I went into construction because I ran out of money one too many times. I tried to go to school and I just couldn't afford the foreign student tuition, and I realized that I needed to make a little bit more money before I could pursue my dreams. I graduated from later on after I started my own construction company in the drywall business with a brother of mine, which lasted an endeavor that lasted over 3.5 decades. I finally went back to school to USF and graduated. As soon as I completed my undergraduate studies, I enrolled into the master's program. And I have been very involved in the Portuguese community. I was one of the founders of the Portuguese Heritage Publications of San Jose that started in 2001. And prior to that, I was one of the founders and first presidents of the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce of Santa Clara Valley. I have here a couple of good friends, long-term good friends. My wife, Judy, we both together have 4 kids and 6 grandkids, so we are in track as being defined by the good Portuguese. I wanted to talk to you about a book that we brought with us, and that you'll have the opportunity to take a copy free of charge if you want to donate to Whalers Fest. More power to you. But it will be a summary of what we have been doing in the past few years as far as publishing and on a voluntary basis. According to reliable research, the first Portuguese immigrant in California was Antonio Rocha, a native of northern Portugal who, in the company of a fellow Galician crew member, deserted the English schooner Columbia while she was anchored in this very bay of Monterey. And although most deserters would generally be turned to the ship's captain by the local Spanish authorities, the 2 men were authorized for some unknown reason to remain ashore. I want to start this brief presentation by talking about the Portuguese presence in our state. It was a dear subject that a dedicated group of volunteers of Portuguese Heritage Publications who devoted their time and energy for the past 2 decades in researching, preserving, and disseminating the history of the presence of the Portuguese in California. We have published 35 books, 7 of which make up our research collection, which you might be looking at, which includes The Portuguese Shore Whalers of California, 1854-1904, a compilation of 15 years of treacherous research by author David Ernest Bertown. Unfortunately, David, who's the expert and the most qualified person to render this presentation about the Portuguese in fishing and whaling in the Monterey Bay, could not be present here today due to health-related concerns. To mitigate his absence, and as I referred just a short time ago, and also to mitigate his wealth of knowledge, Portuguese Heritage Publications, in collaboration with the promoters of Whalefest, decided to make available free of charge a deluxe copy of this unique book to all of you interested in the topic and in attendance at this symposium. Donations are encouraged, as the proceeds will revert to Whalefest 2022. I shall note that some of the slides and the photos used in this presentation are properly credited and all copyrights fully acknowledged in Mr. Bertown's book. Because you will have the opportunity to take home a copy of the book, I will concentrate my comments around a more general topic regarding the role of the American whaling industry as the direct cause of the existence of a Portuguese community in California. Although our first immigrant, as I mentioned previously, Antonio Rocha, worked in a ship engaged in commerce in England, China, Hawaii, Pacific, and Alaska, most of the Portuguese pioneers who settled in California, primarily from the Azores Islands, were directly connected to the American whaling industry. Shore whaling was one of the business endeavors of the New England colonists since the 1600s. But it was not until the mid-1700s that the high demand of lubricants brought about by the industrial expansion, the introduction of new odorless lighting systems, and an increased demand for whale oil forced the needs to improve the conditions, size, and quality of the fleet, which had to go out further and further to catch the precious whales, particularly the most valuable sperm whales. Larger whaling ships capable of ever longer voyages and able to process the whales on board became the norm for the industry to survive. Somehow, this slide doesn't belong here. This one. Needless to say that these poorly compensated long voyages, sometimes lasting several years under very harsh conditions, became less appealing to the New England crews at a time when whaling had exploded in the towns of New Bedford and Newport in the second half of the 18th century. In search for the valuable prey, the New England whaling fleet often stopped over at Cape Verde in the Azores Islands, particularly at the calm harbor of Horta in the island of Fayal, to rest up, repair ships, replenish supplies in fresh water, and quite frequently to recruit locals as crew members. The first of the two previous slides shows a large number of whaling barks in the Bay of Horta, Azores, in the 1800s. The second is a newspaper clipping of 1841 advertising the strategic value of the Pico Island across from Fayal for the whaling barks to acquire fruits, vegetables, and somewhat disguised recruits. Just like the island of Fayal, the calm bays of Flores Island was also a pivotal stopping point for the American whalers. As early as 1780, Antão de Almada, then governor of the Azores, noted in his diary, A vast number of Azorians from the western group of islands embarked as crew members in 200 American barks that were in the vicinity of the Azores. Impoverished, unskilled young men living from small farming, not fishing, and in very precarious and desperate conditions, often pursued work in fulfillment of the dream of abandoning their native islands aboard the American whaling ships at the exchange of a passage and an adventure in the New World. They often boarded the whaler by swimming to it or with the assistance of small fishing boats during the night to escape the local authorities who did not approve the practice. It was called leap immigration. The American bark became a symbol of alternative to the difficult Azorian life and the passport to America. Language barriers and lack of skills often dictated lower paying positions, or they worked for free for 1 year in exchange for the trip to America. This was the genesis of the Portuguese Azorian immigration to the United States. Over the years, many settled in the East Coast, working agriculture and fishing. Many others kept working in the whaling industry. And it is believed that by 1850, according to Leopap, 1/3 of the New England whaling ship crews were Portuguese. Whale scarcity in the Atlantic brought many of the whaling ships around Cape Horn to the Pacific into the California coast to take advantage of the abundant catch during the whale migrations. Meanwhile, in 1848, gold is discovered in California, and many whaling barks were abandoned and some set on fire in the San Francisco Bay. The crews embarked on another adventure of gold prospecting. The Portuguese crew members were no exception. And for the first time, the census of 1850 detects that a small number, 109 Portuguese, were living in California. The table being presented shows the evolution of the Portuguese and the California populations in the state by decades following the discovery of gold. By 1860, there were 1,500, and a decade later, in 1870, the number was still rather small, about 3,445 people, reaching over 10,000 in 1880. Between 1880 and 1920, what I called the first real wave of Portuguese immigrations to California, that number increased from 13,159 to approximately 35,000. It should be noted that California was also sparsely populated in 1848, and excluding the American natives, it only had about 15,000 inhabitants. Due to the frenzy of the gold rush, 2 years later, California's population had increased to 92,000 and to 1.5 million in 1900. Currently, and according to the 2010 census, the Portuguese American population in California is estimated around 358,000, approximately 1% of the total population of the state. We estimate roughly that approximately 95% of them have Azorian roots. Some of the Portuguese pioneers were lured to gold mining in the Sacramento area and in the northern part of the state around Hawkinsville, where there was a concentration of 230 Portuguese miners. However, the majority settled in Sausalito, Marin, and Alameda counties and dedicated themselves to agriculture and dairying. A small group ended up in the California coast, and especially in the Central Coast, and helped establish or worked in shore whaling stations. From 1850 to the turn of the 20th century, as many as 26 of these stations were established. From Crescent City to Trinidad, Humboldt County, Humboldt Bay, Bolinas, Moss Beach, Half Moon Bay, Pigeon Point, Pescadero, Point Ano Nuevo, Davenport Landing, Capitola Beach, Monterey, Carmel, Point Sur, Piedras Blancas, San Simeon, San Luis Obispo, Point Conception, Goleta, Portuguese Bend, San Pedro Bay to San Diego Bay. There were 26 of these operations. Many of these operations were established and managed with the assistance and in some cases manned by Portuguese, but not all, as you will be able to see from Breton's research. However, in the context of this symposium, we will center our attention on the Carmel, Whalers Cove at Point Lobos, and Monterey Bay Whaling Station, San Carlos Beach number 1, San Carlos Beach number 2, and Maccabee Beach and Cannery Row, which were all manned and operated by Portuguese Azorians. The Carmel Whaling Company moved to Carmel, from Monterey to Carmel Cove, today's Point Lobos Reserve in Carmel in 1862. It is believed that the present-day whaler's cabin was the company's headquarters. It was a joint stock company, probably the one described by Charles Scammon in 1874 as numbering 16 men, consisting of one captain, one mate, one cooper, 2 boat steerers, and 11 men. 2 whale boats of 6 men each were put out to sea. 4 men remained on shore to take turns at the lookout station and to work the trying out when a whale had been brought in. Although each member received an equal portion, 1/16 of the profits, the captain and the mate received a bonus of $200 and $300 each and were exempt from all the expenses of the company. Scammon describes the Carmel Whaling Station as follows. Scattered around the foothills, which come to the water's edge, are the neatly whitewashed cabins of the whalers. Nearly all of them are Portuguese from the Azores or western islands of the Atlantic. They have their families with them and keep a pig, sheep, goat, or cow prowling around the premises. And these, with a small garden patch yielding principally corn and pumpkins, make up the general picture of the hamlet. It is a pleasant retreat, far from the rough voyages experienced on board of whale ships. In 1870, the Carmel Whaling Company included the following whalemen, all living in Carmel area. Please note that all 25 men identified as having their, note that all of them have their roots and their birthplace in the Azores, even though some of their names might have already suffered phonetic and Americanization changes. A similar scenario is revealed when one looks at the list of the captains and agents during the history of the operation. Besides their daily gardening activity in the whaling profession, these Azorians also preserved their traditions and celebrated the Holy Spirit festivities, one of the oldest and dearest religious traditions in the Azores Islands. According to oral tradition, this very crown on display at the Carmel Mission Museum is a testament to their religious fervor celebrated annually at the mission. The station ceased to exist in 1884. Monterey shore whaling. Most shore whaling operations resembled this watercolor from Ray Wallace of the Portuguese Bend Whaling Station in 1885. Assumably a lookout post, a hoist to drag the whales to shore, the try-works, large iron cauldrons, boats, a storage shed for the equipment and running of the operations, in addition to a few fearless and strong men. In all, a very primitive setup, although some companies had their headquarters away from the try-works location. At first, the crews, 6 men per boat, used hand-thrown and later cannon-propelled harpoons to capture the whales. one of the most prominent names in the whale shoring industry in Monterey was Captain John Davenport, a Rhode Island native and former whaling ship captain. He was the fourth, the investor, and the first captain in the establishment of the Old Monterey Whaling Company in 1854 with the assistance of Portuguese Joe Francis, also born as José Francisco Pereira, and Joseph Clark, originally José Machado. The probable location of the operation was San Carlos Beach. Davenport left the company and Francis reorganized it with a bunch of, in the assistance of several Portuguese whalers. By 1859, he had been replaced, Francis had been replaced as captain by Manuel Gonzalez. The second pillar of the resurgence of whaling in California's Central Coast was José Pedro Gomes, a Portuguese captain who in 1878 was associated with Joseph Clark at the St. Simeon Whaling Station. In 1875, he was with the Carmel Company, and in the early 1880s, he was associated with the Old Monterey Company after he had been associated with the St. Simeon Whaling Station in 1875. This photo shows José Pedro and his crews wearing tall hats and the long coat. They must have dressed up for the photo op because they most likely did not wear formal attire to their labor-intense whaling expeditions. John Davenport was also the first captain and the owner of the assets of the new Whaling Company of Monterey, established in 1858. This was also a company manned and managed by Portuguese for most of its existence. After Davenport's departure in 1862, Manuel Vieira da Silva replaced them as captain from 1862 to 1868. The company was no longer in operation in 1874. Interesting to note that while Bertão refers to the important role of Manuel V. da Silva in the Monterey whaling industry, on a lighter note, he also points out that one of his 8 children, Florinda Woods, became one of the best-known madams of Cannery Row. Thus, another Portuguese unique contribution to the social and entertainment fabric of the local society. From Bertão's research in the illustrations being displayed, just like in Carmel, the Portuguese overwhelmingly dominated the coastal whaling industry in Monterey, operating from San Carlos and Maccabee beaches in Cannery Row, in the heart of Monterey Bay during the second half of the 19th century. The next 2 tables illustrate the strong and almost exclusive Portuguese presence in the Monterey Bay whaling industry scene. The first slide shows the identified members of the Old Monterey Company, Whaling Company, which operated from 1854 to 59, and the list of captains and agents during the new Monterey Whaling Company's lifespan. The second slide is a compilation of the names of the whalers of the old and the new Monterey Whaling Company in 1870, showing their birthplaces, no doubt where they came from. Lastly, I would like to point out that Mr. Bertão's book also includes about 100 of its 300 and some odd pages of genealogical and biographical information and details about this group of brave men. Most of them were illiterate, probably didn't know how to read or write, but somehow David Bertão was able to compile a very, in some case, very short summary of their biographical history. I encourage all of you to take a copy of the book, and because this is precious research of a slice of the history of the Monterey Bay in the second half of the 19th century. I sincerely hope I piqued your interest. about the topic of shore whaling in the Monterey Bay, and that you enjoy this brief presentation about the origins and the history of the presence of the Portuguese in California, and the role its pioneers played, and it's so well described in The Portuguese Shore Whalers of California, 1854-1904 by David Bertel. Thank you.
Would you like to take a couple of questions?
Sure.
Would anybody have any questions? And copies of the book are,
Yeah, the copies of the book are here to the left on top of the table, and everyone is welcome to take a copy. And if you know of anybody that might be interested in the topic or the history of the Portuguese in California, please take one. And the reason why we're doing this, even though we were a nonprofit organization for 21 years, it's because we are in the process of dissolving. Our energy has subsided, the volunteers have diminished in number, and so we are basically giving our inventory away, and it would be our pleasure for you to take a copy, or two, or three, whatever you want. Thank you.
speaking of, ask Antoinette to come forward, a brief presentation for you.
I just want to thank you. This time I get to do it more formally. Most of the time I'll just give it to somebody, but thank you for coming on. Thank you for bringing your beautiful books.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.